none of them have any evidence to back up their boasts. Some of those explorers even claim that the tower is still being raised, if you can believe that. These trivial facts comforted him, as all facts did. Thomas Senlin was a reserved and naturally timid man who took confidence in schedules and regimens and written accounts. Marya nodded dutifully, but was obviously distracted by the parade of humanity outside. Her wide green eyes darted excitedly from one exotic diversion to the next. What Senlin merely observed, she absorbed. Senlin knew that, unlike him, Marya found spectacles and crowds exhilarating, though she saw little of either back home. The pageant outside her window was nothing like Esau, a salt-scoured fishing village, how many hundreds of miles behind them. Esau was the only real home she'd known, apart from the young women's musical conservatory she'd attended for 4 years. Esau had 2 pubs, a whist club and a city hall that doubled as a ballroom when occasion called for it, but it was hardly a metropolis. Marya jumped in her seat when a camel's head swung unexpectedly near. Senlin tried to calm her by example, but couldn't stop himself from yelping when the camel snorted, spraying them with warm spit. Frustrated by this lapse in decorum, Senlin cleared his throat and shooed the camel out with his handkerchief. The tea set that had come with their breakfast rattled now, spoons shivering in their empty cups as the engineer applied the brakes and the train all but stopped. Thomas Senlin had saved and planned for this journey his entire career. He wanted to see the wonders he'd read so much about, and, though it would be a trial for his nerves, he hoped his poise and intellect would carry the day. Climbing the Tower of Babel, even if only a little way, was his greatest ambition, and he was quite excited. Not that anyone would know it to look at him. He affected a cool detachment as a rule, concealing the inner flights of his emotions. It was how he conducted himself in the classroom. He didn't know how else to behave anymore. Outside, an airship passed low enough to the ground that its tethering lines began to snap against heads in the crowd. Senlin wondered why it had dropped so low, or if it had only recently launched. Marya let out a laughing cry and covered her mouth with her hand. He gaped as the ship's captain gestured wildly at the crew to fire the furnace and pull in the tethers, which was quickly done amid a general panic, but not before a young man from the crowd had caught hold of one of the loose cords. The adventuresome lad was quickly lifted above the throng, his feet just clearing the box of a carriage before he was swung up and out of view. The scene seemed almost comical from the ground, but Senlin's stomach churned when he thought of how the youth must feel flying on the strength of his grip high over the sprawling mob. Indeed, the entire brief scene had been so bizarre that he decided to simply put it out of his mind. The guide had called the market a raucous place. It seemed perhaps an understatement. He'd never expected to make the journey as a honeymooner. More to the point, he never imagined he'd find a woman who'd have him. Marya was his junior by a dozen years, but being in his mid-30s himself, Senlin did not think their recent marriage very remarkable. It had raised a few eyebrows in Esau, though. Perched on rock bluffs by the Nero Ocean, the townsfolk of Esau were suspicious of anything that fell outside the regular rhythms of tides and fishing seasons. But as the headmaster and the only teacher of Esau's school, Senlin was generally indifferent to gossip. He'd certainly heard enough of it. To his thinking, gossip was the theatre of the uneducated, and he hadn't gotten married to enliven anyone's breakfast table conversation. He'd married for entirely practical reasons. Marya was a good match. She was good-tempered and well-read, thoughtful though not brooding, and mannered without being aloof. She tolerated his long hours of study and his general quiet, which others often mistook for stoicism. He imagined she had married him because he was kind, even-tempered, and securely employed. He made 15 shekels a week for an annual salary of 13 minas. It wasn't a fortune by any means, but it was sufficient for a comfortable life. She certainly hadn't married him for his looks. While his features were separately handsome enough, taken all together...